Annabel, nice to meet you again after our meeting in Nuremberg at the beginning of this year. Thank you for taking the time to talk to us here on Whiskey Experts. And for the few people that do not know you and your distillery right now, because you have been on the news in Germany quite a lot, could you introduce yourself and the distillery you're running?
Yes, of course. So I'm Annabel Thomas. I am the founder and CEO of Nc'nean Distillery, which is on the west coast of Scotland. We are located in a very remote area, and our focus is really on two things. One is sustainability, and the other is producing interesting whiskey.
Sustainability means that you are energy independent, right?
Not quite. It means we 100% renewable energy.
Okay, perfect.
90% of that is independent, and we get from a forest where the distillery is, but there's a small amount of electricity we have to buy in from the grid, but that we buy in renewable energy. But it also encompasses all of the other things we do. So we're also 100% organic. We are a zero waste distillery. We recycle all of our cooling water. The bottle is 100% recycled materials. So it's a kind of broad philosophy.
Why did you start a distillery, by the way? So where did this idea come about?
Well, it's a long story, as these things often are, but I'll try and tell the short version of it. So it was originally a family idea. It's on my family's farm. And I guess that was the very original inspiration, was the actual place. But I got into it when I was doing some research because of this idea, and I went to tour lots of distilleries in Scotland, and I just kind of felt like they were all doing things in a very similar way, and none of them were thinking about sustainability. And I think that it's really important that the industry keeps moving forward, that times change and priorities change. And I think we need, and also what consumers want changes. And I think it's really important that the industry does that. And I love Scotch. And I just thought, well, this is the opportunity. Let's go do it. And hopefully we can be the trailblazers.
Is it easy to source enough organic material, organic barley, or have problems finding it?
It's okay, actually. That was a concern about. We only buy Scottish organic barley, so it's a very small definition. But actually, surprisingly enough, quite a lot of Scottish organic barley goes to England. So yeah, there's plenty. I think we buy 20% of what's grown, or 10 or 20% of what's grown, or something. But there's plenty more. Okay.
So the distillery is a little bit off the beaten roads, isn't it? So it's not easy to come there. So is tourism, whiskey tourism, a part of a business plan, or do you just welcome guests because they come?
Very much the latter.
Okay.
It's definitely not a significant source of revenue for us, but we do consider it important, because for people who have made the effort to get all that way, we really enjoy having them there. So, but yes, it is 3.5. You have to. It's not on an island, but you have to take a ferry because the coastline's very uneven. And then the last hour of driving is just on single track roads. So everyone arrives and says, gosh, this is the most remote place I've ever been to. We've never had anyone arrive and say, oh, that was easy.
So where would be the nearest place to stay overnight, for example?
Well, there's actually a bed and breakfast a mile down.
Okay.
So we're not in the middle of nowhere in that sense. We're actually in a little village called Drimnin, but there are only 50 or so houses there. And then at the end, if you drive back down the road 30 minutes, there's a bigger village called Loch, which has, a bar and a hotel and a shop and a restaurant and all of the basics.
So you started distilling in 2017, right? Correct. And your first release was just a couple of weeks ago. And have you been happy with the reception so far?
Very happy. To be honest, we could not have dreamed that it would go so well. I suppose especially in COVID, because, last year we had all these grand plans for the whiskey launch. And then COVID hit, and we kind of had to abandon them all and start again. And you don't really know what to expect, do you? When you're operating, no one knows what's going on at the moment. So, but yeah, we've been unbelievably happy. We sold out really quickly, the demand for more, and the feedback's been great. So you can't really ask for more than that, can you?
Okay, you completely sold out with the first inaugural release.
Exactly. We actually did two inaugural releases in some ways. We have this cask ownership program, and we also have quite a big group of shareholders. And we wanted to do something very specific for them and for our newsletter subscribers that was different, that they couldn't get anywhere else. So we did a very small release of 1,300 bottles called Nc'nean for those guys. And then we did, which was also a bit more highly priced and was cask strength and things. But then we brought out batch 1 in September, which is our core expression. This is the kind of whiskey that will evolve but be part of our range forever, which was about 5,000 bottles. And both of them sold out in 24 to 36 hours. So it's great.
Great.
And we're now busy bottling more and getting more ready to.
Great. When we last met in Nuremberg, you talked a little bit about doing things different than other distilleries. And it's not just the organic thing or the sustainability. It's also that you use different yeasts, right?
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes. So I guess our philosophical focus is more on the spirit than it is on the casks. The casks are obviously essential, but I find the spirit really interesting. And one of the biggest influences on the taste of the spirit is the yeast.
Okay.
So we run different recipes through the distillery. So we produce multiple types of spirit in a year. We have 2 core expressions, which use different yeasts. One is a very traditional recipe, the kind that you would find in most distilleries across Scotland. Sorry, hang on a sec. The other one uses 2 yeasts, one of which is a wine yeast and produces more kind of fruity flavors. But then we take it further than that, and we do 2 or 3 yeast experiments a year where we take a yeast that's really not meant for distilling at all and use that instead. So we've used red wine yeast, we've used champagne yeast, we've used Chardonnay to see different flavors they produce.
Right. So there's a little bit lag in the transmission, but it's okay. So which you said champagne yeast, and which was the other one?
Well, we use different ones every year, actually, so to try new ones out. Sometimes we repeat them if we feel they've been particularly successful. But so far we have used one designed for champagne, one designed for Chardonnay, so white wine, one designed for red wine, and one designed for rum. Okay,
great. And do you taste the difference already in the spirit? Is it so clear and pronounced that you can say, okay, that's this yeast, that's the other yeast?
Yes. You can absolutely taste the difference in the spirit, and the taste differences are maybe it's the power of suggestion, but it's sort of what you would expect. So with the rum yeast, it's kind of you get pineapple flavors. With the red wine yeast, you get red fruit flavors. The bit, of course, that we don't yet know is what will happen with maturation.
Okay.
So obviously the impact of the yeast will decline over time because the casks also start to play their part.
Yeah.
So that's the beauty and the frustration of whiskey distilling. You have to wait and see.
What about the mashes? Are they different per yeast, or do you do the same mashes for every yeast?
It depends a little bit. We have two types of mash. We apply them differently. In general, the mash depends on how long we think we're going to mature the spirit for.
Right.
If we think we're going to mature the spirit for a very long time, the mashing becomes less important, honestly. If we think we're going to mature the spirit for a relatively short time, then we put a lot of effort into, we leave the mash there to soak for at least an hour for flavor development. And then we also concentrate on getting a super clear wort.
Okay. So what else is different about your process in making whiskey compared to other distilleries? Is there something that's connected to being organic, or is it just a style that you do something different?
There are other subtle differences through the process, like our cut points on the stills and things, for example. But most of the other technical bits in the distilling process are fairly similar. From an organic point of view, actually, there is not a huge amount of difference. It really comes down to the barley, and there's probably flavor differences in that, but you still deal with it in the same way as you would in a normal distillery.
Right. Let's move on to maturation. Do you store all your casks on site, or do you store your cask somewhere else as well?
Basically, we store them all on site. Although we're in a period right now where our first warehouse is full and we're waiting to build our second one. Okay. There shouldn't have been a very big gap, but partly for, everything always takes longer, and now partly COVID, it's taken actually ages. So we've been waiting for 5 months for planning permission or something. And, so we're temporarily storing some offsite in Glasgow, but we'll start storing on site again as soon as the warehouse is built.
How many casks will you be able to store then?
You're testing my maths here. I think we will get up to about 4,500 casks.
Well, that's quite a lot. And that's how much production? How many years?
We produce about 600 to 700 a year. Okay. So basically it will be at least 6 years production, maybe a bit more. Perfect. It slightly depends also on the layout of the warehouse and things. But
And you do also have a cask program running where you can buy casks. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so we've been running that since the beginning. We love it because we end up with these so we sell 60 casks a year. We end up with these 60 people that we have a very close relationship with. And it's like they're kind of coming on the journey with us, which is great. It's so you can choose both the type of cask that you want, but also the spirit recipe that you want. Okay. So we have these two main recipes: the young recipe, which and the old recipe.
Sorry to interrupt you. The last sentence was cut off again.
Sorry, I stopped for that exact reason. I could see that you had frozen. You would never believe that the internet, that I'm in London and the internet is meant to be great.
Okay.
So you can choose both the cask type and the recipe. So you can either choose the young recipe, which is meant to be, matured for 5 to 10 years, or the old recipe, which we'd recommend keeping for at least 10 years. You can personalize your cask. You can come in non-COVID times and fill it yourself. You can come and visit it. So yeah, it's a really nice way of getting involved, but also us getting to know our cask owners as well.
You're getting your samples as well, I suppose, right? Yeah, right.
Exactly. However, we have now sold out for this year.
Okay.
So as a kind of unexpected knock-on reaction I think because now we're becoming better known in the whiskey world because we've launched whiskey, interest in casks has gone up. So actually we won't have any available until April next year now.
You were talking about 2 different recipes for the casks. Do you know the sweet spots for the whiskey of the recipes? Do you know when you, in your opinion, the Nc'nean whiskey will be at its best?
Well, we definitely can't say for sure yet, but
from your experience,
I think that I would like to see it get to 6 years at least for our young recipe. That's kind of at least what we're aiming for. And then we just have to see what happens from there on in.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about the next releases from the distillery. What is planned? What can you talk about?
Yep. So at the moment, we have what we think of as our core expression. So this is this is the best product that we have at the moment. Here it is. So that's what batch 1 was. It's 65% STR cask and 35% ex-bourbon. And that is what we are releasing this year. We'll have more batches coming, but it will be a similar makeup. So we're not doing any 100% bourbon releases, for example, this year. So there'll be a few more batches of that this year to come. And then next year, we will start looking at special editions as well. We've still got quite a lot of work to do on them. We've got loads of ideas. And we have to try and narrow them down to what we actually think is ready, but also is the most exciting thing that we can release. So I mentioned the yeast experiments earlier. We definitely want to release those as specific.
Yeah, that would be interesting.
Bottlings, but we need to just time that right. Obviously, you don't want it to mature for too long and the impact of the yeast is lost, but also it's got to be mature enough. So we're monitoring those carefully and we'll make a decision early next year about whether we think they're ready for release next year. And if not, we have other ideas up our sleeves. We also have sherry casks in the warehouse, which we haven't used at all so far. They're bigger, so they mature much less quickly, and we didn't think they were ready for this release. But that's something that will come into play maybe as part of the core expression or maybe as a separate release later on down the line.
And what about single cask for different countries, for example? Are you planning this?
That's definitely, I would say, undecided yet, but yes, definitely an option. We're actually doing our first single cask release with Boutique.
I see.
I think this month, or maybe next month anyway.
Really?
It's already happened. So they're releasing a single bourbon cask.
Okay. And you're still you're still saying no peated releases and no peated whiskey?
Afraid so. We are saying that. So we will, I won't say never, but at the moment we don't use peated barley. However, we are looking at some cask options to allow us to introduce some smokiness.
Okay.
It might be a peated cask, but there are a few other ideas that we have up our sleeves as well, and that would allow us to introduce some smokiness. So
okay. And I was the impression last time we talked about the whiskey that you're not a very big fan of cask finishing, and you don't use it that much. Okay, that broke the internet.
You're back now. What do I think about cask finishes? I think as long as they have a very clear purpose, I think they can be great. But we're not going to be putting out port cask finishes or, the kind of standard cask finishes that you see out there. But I guess that's also part of our philosophy. We're trying to bring something different to whiskey rather than do the things that have already been done. But that's not to say we won't do any. There are a couple of producers of interesting spirits out there that we've started talking to, and if we can find the right partnership and something interesting, then it's not something we would never do. It's just not our focus.
Okay. Well, Annabel, thank you for your time. Thank you for talking to us. It was a pleasure again, of course. And have a nice day here over in UK. And see you soon.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me. Always nice to chat.